So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Are we good with the camera back there? All right. So if everybody could take your seat, we will start our very last Senate meeting of winter quarter. So before we begin, I want to make just a few remarks. So I'm going to talk just a little bit more about Core Ed. I know that you're all very excited to hear about that, but I'm going to provide you some resources for you to explore on your own a little bit more in depth what we are proposing. I also want to put out an invitation to those of you who are excited about the Core Ed process that we're beginning on. In week 10 of spring quarter, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, there's going to be a group of us going from the University of Oregon to Salt Lake City to participate in a conference, kind of a facilitated conference for schools that are doing some sort of updating of their core education. So this is something that we have applied for and we have been accepted to. So I'm planning on going. Ron Bramhall is planning on going. Emily Simnett, who teaches in composition and is on the Core Ed Task Force, is planning on going as well. We had intended to have 2 additional people go. The original plan was to choose those people from members that were elected to the Core Ed Council, assuming such a Core Ed Council exists by then. However, we actually have to make the decision before we're going to have the names of people for the Core Ed Council. So if you are interested in going to Salt Lake City to involve yourself in some of this more in-depth conversations around Core Ed and what this looks like at various places, please let me know. You can send me an email, and I'll pass that on to the other members going, and we can take it from there. But just so you know that this is happening, and there will be a report back from that as well, so you know what we discussed at the meeting. All right, so I wanted to show you just a few things about the website which might be useful, and then to talk a little bit more about Core Ed goals, areas, and methods of inquiry. So maybe I'll do it in slightly reverse order. If you go to the Senate meeting agenda, this is on the Senate webpage. This is a link to a Prezi presentation, which should take you here once it loads. Right. And so this is just a presentation, and what it holds is it holds proposed language for the learning outcomes that we're proposing to attach both to the subject-specific, the categories, arts and letters, social sciences, natural sciences, which largely has already been passed, at least in some minimal form, from the transfer articulation legislation that we passed earlier. But then it also is talking about the learning outcomes that we're attaching to the statements that come from our mission. So some of this, we've decided to introduce some new definitions just because there's lots of terminology for similar things. So you can go under the definitions tab right here, and so what we're proposing is using the term learning goals for what I've been calling objectives or outcomes up until now. Some of this is just jargon, but some of it is just useful to have one word reflect more than one concept. So learning goals, these are just statements that describe the knowledge or competencies that students should acquire in a course. Then we're using the word methods of inquiry, or we're proposing to use the word methods of inquiry for the categories of learning goals that come from the mission. So the 4 that we're proposing are critical thinking, creative thinking, written communication, and then ethical inquiry, I think is where we landed on the 4th one, where those are methods of inquiry. And then we're calling areas of inquiry the broad areas of study required. So these are social sciences, natural sciences, arts and letters, multicultural, etc. So, and then the assessment criteria are going to be criteria where we can assess whether or not our students have met their learning goals. Right? So this is just language right here But then if you go back to the main, let me see, so if I go into, say, areas of inquiry, so these are the 4 areas of inquiry. I have not included the multicultural requirement here because there is a group of faculty working on that separately. We had some of that conversation in the Senate last time, so I did not want to put that down because it's still in flux somewhat. However, what is here under the arts and letters, natural sciences, social sciences, and writing composition, right, this is essentially the thing that Frances showed us when she was talking about the transfer articulation agreements that we passed here in response to House Bill 2998. Frances, yes.
Just to clarify, we didn't pass these then. They were passed earlier under the AAOT and the OTM.
Okay. Thank you.
A long time ago.
Okay. We confirmed that we were going to use them in response to the transfer articulation agreements, but they were passed previously. But at any rate, you can see them, right, and you can revisit them. So these are the ones that Frances talked about earlier. Now, the ones that we have yet to pass fall under methods of inquiry, and the proposal, if you recall, is for the first 3 of these, critical thinking, creative thinking, and written communication, that we pull these from the American Association of Colleges and Universities. They have a values rubric which has been vetted by lots of people all over the country, and so we are proposing that we pull our goals and assessment criteria from there. So that's what this information is. Again, this right here is just a proposal to the Senate. I invite you to go through and look at these more carefully. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but I'm providing you the ability to do that so that when we have a discussion about passing these, they will not be a surprise to you. I will say, again, the ethical inquiry, right now this is to be determined. We had a very nice event last Thursday, which I think went well. We brought together a number of individuals from across campus that talk about ethics in their courses, and so we do have some proposed language here, but it's just a little bit too raw to show you right now. But as soon as we have a more well laid out version of this, I will post it here. I think that will be after next Tuesday when we have our next core education task force. Right. So if you have questions or concerns about anything in any of this information, I would be very interested in knowing about it, and the core ed task force would be interested in knowing about it. So I want to do one other brief thing with you, and this is just kind of showing you some of the features of the Senate webpage, but in relation to this. So the Senate webpage is here. If you go under committees and go to committees A to Z, what you'll find is all of the bazillion of committees that we have, right? And you can click on any of these committees and find more information about them. So for instance, if I go down here to the Senate Core Education Task Force, right here, I can see more information about this. And if you have a question or concern about something that this committee is working on, you can just click the email committee button, and it will automatically populate an email with all of the members of the committee, and you can email them and say, hey, Core Ed Task Force, I'm wondering about this, or I would like more information on this, or whatever you want. And this is available for all of the committees. So anytime you are interested in what's going on in one of these committees or you want to discuss on their agenda, you can just go to the appropriate committee on the right, go down to membership, and then click on the email committee, and you'll be able to email them. So, what's that?
Can you see their email addresses?
Yes, you can. Yes.
I can copy and paste it into my own email program.
You could copy and paste it into your own email program, though if you, let's just look at one of them, say IAAC, and you go to members. Right, I mean, it does show each of the email addresses right there, but it's a little bit harder to copy and paste than if you just click the email button, and it will just automatically populate it and allow you to email the group. So, yes, there's a hard way to do it and an easy way to do it. but that information is absolutely there. All right, any questions about anything I said before I turn the microphone over to our provost? No. All right. So Provost Banavar, please. Oh, I did forget to announce our new parliamentarian. We're giving her a trial run. This is Jessica Carlson. She has answered several questions already, quite ably. So thank you very much, Jessica, for agreeing to help us in this context. And I will turn the floor over to Provost Banavar.
Phone is turned off, but now it's on. First of all, I wanted to remind you that there's going to be a town hall on Friday from 11 to 12 in the main lecture hall in Straub. And the town hall is about institutional metrics, what it is, why we are doing this, and how it's going to be done. And it's a conversation really where I want to hear from our people, our faculty, about what they think and get some advice and some useful guidance from people. And so just wanted to remind you of that. I believe it's in the big lecture hall in Straub, Straub. I also wanted to talk briefly about a letter that I sent to our faculty in architecture at the end of last week. Just as a quick backdrop, I communicated to them a couple of key points, and I thought it would be useful to share these points with you. The first point I was trying to make was that any official department actions or meetings need to be carried out within school or college shared governance policies and procedures, and not in a manner that excludes colleagues in violation of internal governance policies. And my sentiment here was not to, or is not to, infringe on any rights to gather, to meet, or to express dissent under the CBA, nor was it to quell an individual member's right to speak their mind, and nor did I mean to suggest that faculty cannot gather together informally to commiserate, etc. The purpose of my letter was simply to emphasize that shared governance is a principle that must be upheld at all levels, and that in order for shared governance to be effective, all relevant faculty members must be allowed to freely and fully participate in department debates and processes. There was some concern, understandable concern, following my communication, and this was mostly about the former point, and I want to publicly state that I completely support all your rights under the CBA, UO policy, and the law to gather, to talk, to express views, even disappointment with university leaders. But I wholeheartedly support shared governance in all of its forms, including those at the local school, college, and department level. The second point that I was trying to make was that we have to be collegial towards one another, creating an environment where colleagues feel bullied or worse, fear retaliation in promotion and tenure decisions for having an alternative viewpoint is unacceptable and flies in the face of the very nature of freedom of thought upon which universities are built. The rest of the time here, I would like to briefly speak about the resolution that you will be considering today on the development of the North Campus. As you are well aware, the university submitted a request to the city for a conditional use permit, CUP. The CUP proposal places high priority on addressing the essential needs of the institution's mission and its students, as well as the ecological, educational, and aesthetic value of the Willamette River. At this time, we have a time-sensitive need to build a parking structure that would accommodate night campus and other university parking in the area south of the tracks. It's my understanding that the faculty and community members who have concerns about the CUP do not take issue with the proposals for this southern area. I also understand that there are some significant concerns with the area north of the tracks, and in particular, the proposal to build 3 recreational fields and the potential use of artificial turf and lighting. I want to emphasize a few things. A CUP does not mean that any decisions have been made on what would be built, if anything, in the northern section. What was submitted for the CUP was very broad in order to cover all possible uses for the land. The CUP is meant to last for decades. The last one we received was in effect from 1989 all the way until 2012. There has been no decision made on what will go into the area north of the tracks. I want to emphasize this. No decision has been made. I hear that there are rumors of links between the CUP and the 2021 event that will take place here, the World Track and Field Championships. There is no such link. The recreational fields were added to the CUP in case they were needed in the future to accommodate student growth. Interestingly, I learned that there are 2 existing fields already north of the tracks that would be replaced in the proposal and moved further away from the river than their current location. Furthermore, while I understand the concerns about the particulars of the field related to lighting and turf, I want to emphasize that no new fields are currently approved to be built. We don't yet have the need, and we don't have the money to build them. Any final decision on what would go into the area north of the tracks would go through the Campus Planning Committee, the CPC, and would require a change to the campus plan. We have committed to following that process. The CPC and campus engagement are critical for determining how this work proceeds. We have heard the concerns about timing of meetings and discussions related to the CUP development and can commit to not doing these during the first or last weeks of a term as requested. We value this process, and it has resulted in numerous improvements to the CUP proposals, such as moving the setback for any construction to 200 feet as opposed to the 100 feet required by the city. And all this has been a huge learning experience for me. I was not aware of any of this until a few days ago or a few months ago, and I'm learning more and more. I understand there is an issue that has come up that the city may have changed its interpretation on how the CUP can be submitted. And this is something that's ongoing, and things are proceeding rather rapidly. And so I would like to please invite my colleague Kevin Reed to come and briefly address that point and also answer any questions that you may have. Thank you all very much. Kevin?
Thank you, Provost Bonnevard. I was asked to address the issue of whether the CUP needed to be a single CUP for the entirety of the site, that area south of the railroad tracks, including the area north of the railroad tracks, or whether the university could submit two different applications for CUP. It's been an issue of some controversy. The university has for years wanted to be able to treat both sections differently and has gone to the city and asked for decades for permission to do that, and have been told consistently since the 1990s by by the planning department staff that we had to do a single unified master plan for the entire site. Apparently, lower level staff changed that decision sometime in the last couple of weeks, something they never communicated to the university until your Senate Vice President actually asked them whether it was possible, and the answer that the Senate Vice President got was different from that which the city had been given the university over the years. I called the city attorney to ask exactly what had happened, whether the city attorney had changed interpretation, and what I learned was that the city attorney's office had never been consulted on that issue, and when asked, the city attorney did tell development staff in the last couple of days that they believe that while it is an open question and you could potentially make the argument that you could have two different master plans, one for the north and one for the south, that the city attorney believes that it is more likely than not that the decision of the ultimate decider, the hearing officer, and the land use board of appeals would probably interpret the city ordinance to require a master plan to have only one master plan for a single site. The city attorney argued, described to me as if you were to say that there could be two, then there's no reason not to have multiple, which means that any property owner, any developer could go in and say, I'm master planning this corner for this building, and then I'm going to come in with a different master plan for that corner, inconsistent with the notion that you have a master plan for the site. So while it is an open question, and I can't tell you that it is actually legally impermissible for us to put in more than one, my advice to the university would be that it would be unduly risky to put in more than one master plan, one for the south and one for the north, because there is a possibility, and in fact the city attorney believes a probability, that the land use board would probably reject that application as not being consistent with the ordinance's requirement for a single master plan.
Questions? Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question, but not related to the planning. To your first point.
Wait for the microphone, please, Senator Murray.
My question was about your first point. Can you talk about the relationship between economic imperatives and faculty governance? So, for example, if there was a need to make across-the-board cuts or cuts to units because they were perceived to be inefficient, and those cuts were directed at coursework or faculty, do faculty, is it their prerogative to say no to those cuts if they view the curriculum as essential?
When there are financial cuts of some kind that that is affecting the curriculum, one, I hope, would consult with the faculty, make sure that the interests of the students are taken into account, and if, for example, a dean decides to make certain cuts in order to meet certain financial constraints, then it would be perfectly all right for the faculty to talk to the dean and reason with the dean and come together in order to decide how to make the required cuts in a way that is compatible with the best interests of the students and for the school or college at hand. That's the way I would view it. And sometimes if there is a disagreement between the parties involved, then one could bring in a provost or a president also to weigh in on such matters. But typically curricular matters are ones that are handled by the faculty and by the department heads and by the dean, and that's where I hope that the action would take place. And always putting the interests of the students first.
Any additional questions? If not, thank you, General Counsel Reed. Thank you, Provost Banavar.
Thank you all.
All right, we turn to the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Is there any objection to the approval of the minutes as given? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next, we turn to our business. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. We're going to turn to the approval of the curriculum report. So would you step up, Francis, and let us know what is in the curriculum report, what has changed, whatever you want to tell us about this.
Actually, if I stay here, because I got it in front of me as well, if you don't mind. I don't have to ask Bettina to scroll to pages. It's the typical curriculum report, but I have two amendments from the floor to add to this. So the curriculum report is all the courses that are reviewed and approved and so on. So I forget what number it was. It was a number of courses that we reviewed and approved. I do want to point out that a number of classes will be pended over because they have not completed the course leave form. So that all changes to courses have to happen through the course leave form. That includes what used to be just called an admin action. It still needs to have a course leave entry, which means it needs a syllabus, it needs a student engagement inventory, and it needs learning outcomes. Just those three things for any minor change still have to happen. So sometimes these get pended over because we're waiting for responses. So if you're waiting for your course, please check your inbox to see if you have an unanswered email. There are two items that I need to bring as amendments. They're very minor. One of them concerns the online course regularization. So when the online course policy was developed and voted on in the Senate, that had it's basically a set of policies for how you review online classes. It stated in there that new classes would have to go through regularization as online classes, and then there was a setup for if they're hybrid, if they're online, the type of materials that were needed. It also stated that existing classes that had been taken online but had not been regularized in the online format had 3 years to go through the regularization process. So first of all, just to remind everybody that 3 years is up in 2019. But that's fine. We realized after a while of working on this, we missed an element of classes, which are classes that already exist in the face-to-face format, but departments wish to add an online version. Because what we end up then is an online version of an existing class. Do we give it the number of the existing class, or do we give an experimental number, which then creates two classes with the same number, which is an absolute nightmare. So because our regularization process requires material to be given to the committee that is most frequently developed when a course is being taught for the first time in experimental format. For example, we asked for one recorded lecture, we asked for one example blog post, or one example of all the different interactive forms that happen, as well as grading rubrics and so on. What we decided as the best option would be to go basically under the same principles of when the policy was created. That is to say that if you're going to create an online version of an existing class, you can do that with the existing number, but you can teach it only 3 times before it has to go through regularization in that online format. And that would give people time to develop that online version, work out all the kinks, and then bring us all of the materials that we need to do a regularization. So one of the amendments is just to simply add the clarification that already existing undergraduate online and hybrid classes and new versions that are added to existing classes will also be required to follow this model and be reviewed by the UOCC for equivalence and appropriate assignment of credit hours by fall 2019 or after being taught 3 times since spring 2016. And that captures all of them. Right, and the 2019 will disappear after 2019. It will simply state after being taught 3 times. So that's a clarification for those courses that we weren't, that were confused about what to do because we didn't have clear instruction. The other amendment to the report is a Gen Ed requirement document. This is simply uniting all of the descriptors of what the Gen Ed categories are into a single UO document, because we have multiple ones at the moment. We have the one that sets up the 3 paragraphs. We have the one that does the undergraduate council motions about allowing Gen Ed to go on a 300-level course, and the other requirements of Gen Ed, including that it be a 4-credit class and it cannot be a topics class at the moment, plus the new, or not new, 2005-06, I think, AAOT, OTM course criteria and course outcomes descriptor that you saw as part of the foundational curriculum, and sticks it in one document, so we don't have to have a myriad of different documents referring to the same basic principles. So that's a housekeeping thing of putting it all in one place. Then nothing was actually changed, it was just united into one document. The curriculum report also includes the other curriculum matters, that is the decisions and votes at the undergraduate council, and they're down at the end. I'm going to go down to those. Which includes the various approvals and changes that are done through mostly through the undergrad council. Yeah, questions?
All right. Questions, concerns? Vice President Harbaugh.
Microphone, of course. I'd like to make a motion to divide. I think that the part of the report that involves course approval and comes from the Committee on Courses is substantially different than the other curricular matters, which is what you're seeing on screen now, which typically, as Francis said, comes mostly from the undergrad council and involves what I think are more substantial changes in terms of their effect on the university as a whole. So I'd like to divide those, and that would give us an opportunity to discuss the other curricular matters without complicating things with the course approvals, which I think are pretty routine.
Thank you. Is there a second? See a second from Senator Greenbow, or designee. Commentary about this. I see Francis.
As I said in my emails, for those of you who got them, I object to this very strongly and vociferously. This is a policy, this is our procedure. This is how we have done things for a long time. So you are using a motion from the Senate floor to change procedure. If you wish to change procedure, then you should start a motion to change procedure with a reason why. These changes brought to the senators with no background do a disservice to all of the people on the councils and the UOCC, which, as the head of UOCC, I sit on undergrad council as well, and grad council for that matter. These have been worked on intensely for a long period of time. Sometimes this happens in multiple terms, sometimes it even can go across years. There's research, there are resource people that have brought best practices, national standards, information on the registrar of how many individuals are involved and affected, as well as advising, as well as a huge amount of information. And most people on undergrad council turn up and do a carefully considered job. And I say most because there have been individuals that have to get written emails reminding them they're supposed to turn up when they're on undergraduate council. Bill, who missed almost 2 years of meetings when you were on that committee. Most people turn up and do a very good job. It's very carefully considered, and it's really frustrating to undermine our committee and council structure and their ability to try to work through all these issues and come to a decision, to then pull them out and tear them apart with no background. If you want to do it again, you can do it again, but you're going to have to go through exactly the same process that these councils went through to reach these decisions.
Thank you. Other comments, additional discussion
on the second on the motion to divide?
Yes, the motion to divide was seconded.
So they're only arguing that issue?
Yes, we're only arguing the motion to divide. Yes. No additional commentary or discussion. All those in favor of the motion to divide, please raise your placard. All those opposed? Well, we'll let Kurt do a count, but it looks like the nays have it.
Chris, your assistant to the parliamentarian wants to point out for the future that a motion to divide is not debatable.
Thank you. Thank you. So the motion stays as one. Now we are having discussion about the actual motion in front of you. Is there any discussion about the curriculum report or anything that's in it? Vice President Harbaugh.
Right, so I want to apologize to Frances if she is offended by my efforts to do this. I'm not in any way doubting the work or the quality of the work that goes into the other curricular matters. But what I do think that just as a matter of procedure, it should be separate. It comes from different committees, but that's fine. So in discussing the other curricular matters changes, I did send out an email this morning to the members of the Senate who are in languages and math, because one of these proposals involves changes to the math and language requirements for the degree, and I think that people would be interested in knowing more about that, knowing more about the rationale for that. Unlike the other motions that come before the Senate, these motions don't come with any explanation to speak of. I asked for some extra explanation of some of these changes and got that. But I think as a matter for the future, that we would be able, as a Senate, to make much better decisions about these program changes. And to be clear, these program changes are part of the purview of the Senate. We have a statutory responsibility to consider them and to vote on them. They do come from the undergraduate council, but we are the ultimate authorities on them. So we need to have some information about why they're being done in order to fulfill that responsibility. And that's the point that I'm trying to make here. And so I asked faculty about the language and math requirements. I think if anybody wants to speak to those, that might be helpful. I also asked Frances if she would be willing to, to respond. I CC'd her in the email and asked her if she would be willing to respond to any such questions, because I know that she has a lot of knowledge about this and is generally willing to talk about things in the Senate, the reasons for the decisions that are being made. I'd also note that we're going through an extensive process to revise the university's core curriculum. Several of these program changes involve reductions in the number of core curriculum classes that students in these degree programs will have to take. And it seems odd to me that we would, at the same time we invest so much energy and work into improving the core education curriculum in general, that we would approve reductions in those requirements for certain degrees without any discussion.
Thank you. Further discussion, Academic Council Chair White.
I just would like to remind everybody that both math and languages have representatives on undergrad council, so they have been discussed and seen by the representatives from those departments, and the minutes are open of any of these. I think Ron Bramhall's suggestion of the explanatory paragraph that he provided would be very useful to put in the curriculum report. And reminding everyone the deep history here, quoting Paul Simons, that it used to be one curriculum committee. It was divided into its components of committee on courses, undergrad council and grad council, because of the workload. That's why there is still one curriculum report, that where this all comes together. And given the fact that we have to work a lot with each other, it actually does make a lot of sense. I like Ron's suggestion of providing the rationale. He's provided that in emails to along the chain of people who were copied on it. Also, Alison Schmidtke, the chair of Undergrad Council, which I will remind you, the most people on these councils and committees do not sit on this Senate, so they are not here. She also replied in depth to those comments. And they, again, can be posted as well. But the minutes of Undergrad Council are open as well. And, of course, all councils and committees are always looking for active members if you're interested in getting involved in these processes.
Thank you for helping us recruit. Further discussion? Senator Bowditch.
So when looking at the email trail that was generated by the discussion here, I see that the justification for reducing or eliminating the language and mathematics minimum is to bring the BFA into alignment with BFAs at other institutions in terms of the number of credits. But it says that it is standard to reduce other general education requirements. So can you speak to why the mathematics and language requirements were the ones that were chosen to be reduced rather than other gen ed requirements? I mean, it just seems that the languages are taking such a hit lately on our campus and also, across the nation in higher education. Why reduce those general ed requirements as opposed to other general ed requirements if that is the rationale?
Thank you. Do you want Ron to take this, or would you like to take it, Francis?
I can answer from a curriculum perspective.
Right.
And then, Ron, you want to go?
Okay. Academic Council Chair White.
First of all, I understand and I sympathize with the plight of languages. I have my own personal perspectives on the value of languages. However, curricular decisions have to be made on curricular matters, not on the need of departments to have enrollment, right? So it's got to be done on the basis of what makes sense within the Bachelors of Fine Arts curriculum and what those that are teaching and in charge of the Bachelor of Fine Arts program request. Right, so it is not something we're saying, oh, take that out, take that out. It is their request that it makes more sense to them, given what they are trying to achieve with the Bachelor of Fine Arts, to structure it in this way. Ron?
And Ron Bramhall.
No, these are good discussions. So the overall goal was to bring the BFA into alignment with 5 other undergraduate professional degrees we already have that don't have math and language requirements, and also have reduced group requirements. And we did both of those things for the BFA. So we did reduce the group requirements also, in addition to removing the math and language. And it was simply to align it with the other 5 degrees that are already in this category, which is Bachelor of Architecture, Bachelor of Music, Bachelor of Education, Bachelor of Interior Architecture, and Landscape Architecture. And, looked at the national landscape and sort of what the best practice was. I would also add that we award about 200 degrees 200 degrees per year in these 5 areas. About 30 of them per year are Bachelor of Fine Arts. So 200 degrees a year out of about 4,500, just to give you a sense of the scale. I'm not making a judgment on that, just putting that out there. So that was the thought process.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Senator Lynn.
Thank you. So I understand we don't really need to know all the details about this, but since we asked the question what the rationale, I don't think I hear any. I just said, well, just because we don't seem that there's a reason. So I didn't see the reason why languages or mathematics should be reduced. I still didn't hear that. It seems that what the justification is a reasonable reduction. That's all I hear. But I didn't see any academic reasons why we now don't need language or don't need mathematics. Thank you.
All right. Can somebody address this question? Academic Council Chair White.
I think Ron's point is your answer, and that is that it is to standardize the professional bachelors. This is not talking about the value of math or value of language. It is trying to have consistency among our degrees on their requirements, as well as consistency with national norms. And it's the way the program is structured and makes the most sense to those that are teaching for the BFA specifically. Right? This is not dealing with the BA or the BS. This is specifically dealing with a degree that is structured in this way. It makes sense within that degree. And also, it's cutting down the credits numbers as well, so going across all of the gen ed categories.
Thank you. Senator Lynn.
So the reason is it is a standard that now the language is not required, mathematics is not required. So this is standard, I heard. That's what I have heard.
For the bachelor,
So it's a
sign-up.
standard that we don't need the requirements of language and mathematics. That's the reason. That's not the reason. In the BFA, now it's standard, we don't need language. Okay, I'm fine, I just want to know what's the rationale. Okay, so it's a standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Murray.
I think it's a nice ideal, Francis, and I think you try to practice it, that these decisions are made devoid of economic pressures. But I don't believe it. I believe that departments are pressured to become more efficient, to reduce costs, and then they do bring forward proposals, but those pressures are not always curricular decision pressures.
Thank you. Academic Council Chair White.
You are quite correct. I could give you a list of courses and departments that would like gen ed or multicultural for economic reasons, but they will not get it unless they are doing it for curricular reasons. And it does show, and that's part of the examination. It's part of the examination of what are the cost impacts of the various decisions. It requires a lot of evidence and questioning and back and forth. And yes, it is very important to get past those economic decisions and focus on curricular issues when you're trying to make arguments and separate them out. And that's where a lot of the work of the committees and councils rest.
Thank you.
Try.
Francis, I meant the inverse as well. The inverse. Can I have one more?
Okay. Senator Murray.
There's also an inverse pressure, which is a pressure to reduce costs that sometimes aren't in the best decisions for student learning and the best curriculum decisions, but are made to reduce institutional costs.
Thank you. Further discussion on this topic? Seeing none, we turn to a vote. So all those in favor of the motion to pass the curriculum report, please raise your placard. All those opposed? I see 2. Thank you. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, I believe we have a report from Kurt Wilcox. Isn't that next? The report on awards and elections update. Kurt.
So since this is the last meeting of winter term, it's time for a little commercial about what's coming up in spring term. And those are 2 things, so I think Bettina has something to add as well when I'm done. But one of those things that we typically do in spring term is that we issue awards from the Senate in 4 different areas. And so if you check out the Senate website, as Chris encouraged you earlier, and go under the awards tab, you will see that the new deadlines for the awards programs are there. And they are, the nominations for these 4 awards open April 2nd. There will be an announcement in Around the O about them. You'll have about 3 weeks to make your nominations, so that's April 24th is the close. Anyone can nominate anyone for any of the awards. The nominations all go to the Senate Executive Coordinator. Then there are various committees that will review the nominees and make a decision about who to recommend for those awards. Senate will vote on all the awards at the next to the last meeting of spring term, May 23rd, and we will have the presentation and awards ceremony and refreshments on June 6th. The 4 awards are the Senate Award on Shared Governance, Transparency, and Trust, and that goes to an individual who exemplifies those principles. The Senate Executive Committee is the one that makes a recommendation on who to give that to. We have the Wayne T. Westling Award, which is for outstanding and long-term service to the university, and any faculty or staff member is eligible for that. And the Committee on Committees is the body that makes the recommendation there. And then there are two specific awards. One, the Classified Staff Leadership Award that anyone, again, can nominate someone for, but it will go to a classified employee. And that has to be someone who's done something important in the area of personal and professional development, creating a more respectful work environment, or the area of diversity. And the current classified senators and previous classified senators are the ones who make that recommendation. And then finally, we have the Senate Leadership and Service Award for Officers of Administration. Again, anyone can nominate, but it goes to an officer of administration. And that person has to have demonstrated exemplary service over a period of years, as well as outstanding leadership. There are more details on these awards, the criteria, the submission process on the website, so I would encourage you to take a look at that. And that's it about the awards.
And Bettina Lin, Senate Coordinator.
Okay, so Angela and I have been working together to put together, the communications in the elections ballot, or vacancies rather. Here's a list of the vacancies, the committee, the approximated term length. We might fuss with a few of these because a couple of the committees have gotten off kilter, and sort of the general attributes associated with each seat. So here's the people that we're looking for. Most of them are faculty positions, and anything y'all can do to recruit your colleagues is very much appreciated. We have a little bit of a problem every year recruiting enough faculty to fill the various positions on various committees, including the Faculty Personnel Committee, because y'all have figured out how much work it is. The survey will open on April 3rd, Tuesday of week 1 of spring break. Chris and I are working on tweaking the survey a little bit, but there will be a link on this page to self-select which committees that you are interested in. The survey will be open for about 2 weeks. Angela and I will then will be monitoring the survey to do any additional recruiting as needed, but also we will compile the data afterwards. And the election will take place, per usual, in DuckWeb. That will open on April 30th and run for about 2 weeks, giving us a little bit of wiggle room in case we need to do a runoff election should we have a tie. And we will make the announcements at the June 6th meeting.
Thank you. Any questions about either awards or about elections? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item. So this will be a vote, I hope, on the Core Ed Council. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Vice President Harbaugh, since this is my motion.
Okay, so I forget which stage we are at this. Have we read the motion already? Do you want to read the therefore clauses?
Yep. I will read. So basically, the therefore be it moved is the approval of the parameters for this committee laid out in the 17-point chart. We'll move to that in a second. And that that we direct the Committee on Committees to set the length of the initial terms to ensure that they are staggered. Right, because they're 3-year terms, you don't want everybody rolling off at the same time. So the first couple years, the terms might be 1 year for some people, 2 years for some people, and 3 years for some people. That will be done in some random fashion by the Committee on Committees, but it'll be up to them.
We're good at the random part, yeah.
And then let's look at the redlined version, the most recent redlined version.
While we're doing that, this has been moved by committee, right? So we don't need a second. Is that correct?
That's right. This is coming from the Academic Council now.
Okay, so it's on the Senate table now.
That's right. So if you recall, what we discussed last time, the conversation revolved around the potential addition of seats for mathematics and languages. So this went back to the Academic Council. And so let me read you the new membership requirements, because this is really the only thing that has changed since the last conversation we had. So the new membership requirements would be 6 faculty members elected, 3 from CAS, 1 from each of the divisions, 3 from the professional schools, no 2 from the same college or school, then 4 faculty members appointed at large by the committee on committees from CAS faculty, and at least 2 at-large members shall be appointed each year from areas on the agenda for that year. For instance, if the BA/BS requirement is on the agenda, the 2 at-large members shall be appointed from math and language. Okay. So that is the change that we propose. The student membership is the same. We did change the ex officio membership slightly. So I'll just read that. 6 ex officio administrative resource members, provost or designee, registrar or designee, vice provost / dean of undergraduate studies, associate vice provost for student success, associate vice provost from the office of the provost, and teaching engagement program director. Right? And then, could you scroll down a little bit? And then also ex officio members from other elected committees, so the committee on courses chair, undergrad council chair, or their designees. They would be considered voting members if they're faculty members. And that is the extent of the changes that we discussed in Academic Council.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. All right, so now we're going to discuss another motion that is coming from the Academic Council based on the Honors Task Force report from last June. So I will turn the microphone to Francis, who is chair of the Academic Council, can tell us a little bit about the recommendations we are making. There will not be a vote today. This is a discussion, so there is opportunity to provide input should you think things should change between now and the vote.
So I will just remind everybody to read the Honors Task Force report, which is posted on the Senate site. In looking at the report and in talking with the task force in Academic Council, we divided the proposals, the recommendations of the report into 3 areas. One are those associated with the Clark Honors College. We put those aside because of reorganizations and changes that are underway, and simply said in our motion that they should be paid attention to, and then divided in the remaining recommendations into 2 groups, those that could be done immediately and those that are going to take some planning and organization as well as drafting and review and Senate approval of language. So that's what we've done in these resolutions. The first one is to remove all GPA-only based routes to departmental honors as recommended. There are not many of them. They are basically giving a honors award to students who have GPA criteria, whereas others have to do an honors thesis to get the same recognition with the same GPA. So to allow an equality of what is honors at the departmental level. The second one has actually been in process a very long time and was a recommendation of a proposal that existed quite some time ago, but that was to make the calculation of Latin honors standard across terms. That is, right now it is not. That is easier to get Latin honors in some terms and not in others. So basically to create a standard format for calculating Latin honors. And then the longer ones are below, talking about who should actually prepare summary language of what it means to have honors, where a central site should be kept for a clearinghouse of where honors happen, and working with those departments that don't currently have honors to see whether they wish to develop honors within their programs. And it's divided into who should start that process going, and then those processes should come to the appropriate undergrad council and academic council or Senate before coming to the Senate with revised language. So it's a charge to the Office of Provost largely, and various other units.
Thank you. Any conversation? Senator Phillips.
Yeah, just a question. This thing about having different criteria, different GPA criteria for Latin honors in different terms, I guess this must have been around for a long time. Does anybody know why it was originally done that way? How long has it been that way?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody knows the answer. I certainly don't. Other discussion about this? Senator Minson.
Thank you. So I had a discussion with Dr. Snodgrass about this a while ago, and to give you a brief history on what my mistake that I made was I had a number of students in the Honors College who wanted to get Department Honors at the same time, and I told them that they could not use their Honors College research project for Departmental Honors. And I did that for probably 3-4 years, and then it was in this meeting when they came and told me that a lot of departments actually do allow that. And so I talked to a few people about that, and I'm still confused. So I'd like to, I still feel that to get Department Honors with a research project should be independent from the Honors College. They even termed it double dipping. I don't really have a problem with it at the end of the day, other than it does seem to me that it is exactly that, double dipping. To have one project that Honors College can do to get honors in the Honors College as well as in the Department Honors, but someone who's not in the Honors College has to do the same size project potentially to get departmental honors, but not get the Honors College. So it's not, I don't have a big skin in the game at the end of the day, but I think it's worth our discussing whether that should be ubiquitous across departments and part of this document or whether not.
So would you propose adding some language in this motion? Again, it's not been moved yet, so it could either be done before, kind of informally, or it could be moved as an amendment once it was moved. Do you have a suggestion as to which way we should go on this issue?
My point was more I'd rather hear from more people. If 90% of people say we should put it in, then I'm happy making wording for it. If 90 people say not, then I'll leave it as is. I don't have a whole big skin in the game other than I actually wrote my students who I told like 4 of them, no, you can't do this, and later after they graduated, I told them, sorry, I screwed up. So because it was allowed in our department.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any other conversation about that in particular, so we can try to get some feedback? Senator Phillips and then Vice President Harbaugh.
So I support putting something about this in the motion, that this is something, I mean, maybe it can't be done immediately, but that it should be at least looked at. I think it's a significant issue that should be considered.
Okay, so then what you would suggest is putting something in the motion, tasking some group of faculty to look at the issue and make a recommendation to the Senate.
Yes, I more or less want to endorse what Senator Minson actually seemed to be proposing.
Okay, thank you for that. Vice President Harbaugh.
So I'd be all in favor of having somebody look at this. I'm not sure that the previous task force didn't look at it. I have lots of students who are getting honors in economics and simultaneously getting honors from the Honors College, and it would sort of be difficult because we have econ courses that they have to take as part of their honors, departmental honors. And so that would sort of give them a pretty strong incentive not to get departmental honors, right? Because they'd have to do it twice and pay more and so forth. And I just sort of hate to lose those students, and I'd be afraid that I would under this proposal. But I'm all in favor of looking at it.
Thank you. Academic Council Chair White.
I think this is a really interesting issue and problem. I can see some curricular issues that would need to be navigated, including submitting the same piece of work for 2 credit sources, which is not allowed. Self-plagiarism at that point. And yet there needs to be some agreement that works out that a student could be able to do something and receive credit for things that they are doing. So I think I like the suggestion that we add it as a bullet point that here's an issue you need to be thinking about. It clearly is a complicated one, but it needs to. I'm quite happy to add it as a specific. You will do this. You. Someone else will do this.
Back to Senator Minson.
Thank you for those comments. I will make one quick clarification. I will say that there are students who have gone through honors college and did not have the GPA to make the honors in the department. So it has, in order to get the dual double dip, they had to have the GPA in human physiology as well as do the project. Even at that point, I still wasn't really fully okay with it because as a scientist, I felt it should be still double dipping. So thank you for the comments. And like I said, I didn't really want to lean it one way or the other, but it sounds like it's worth looking at.
Okay. Thank you for that. It sounds like my feeling is that there will be some bullet in whatever the motion that's brought forward to address this in a way that leaves it open to some future body to study the issue and make a recommendation. I'm not hearing consensus. Any other discussion or comments about what is presented here? Ron Bramhall in the back.
I just wanted to answer part of the question about Latin honors. I don't know how long we've done this, but we calculate it differently in the spring term. We calculate it using the grades going into the spring term, so they don't include the students' spring grades. In all other terms, we calculate it using the grades through that term. So the proposal here is to be consistent across the year and have a consistent standard and a consistent way of doing it.
Okay, thank you. Senator Phillips. She's in the back. She's coming forward.
Yeah, so under the current system, is the numerical cutoff the same?
No. I'm hearing the answer is no, but we don't have the data here. But I can ask that when we bring this forward to the Senate next time, that we have a little bit better explanation of how this is calculated and how it works. Is that acceptable? Senator Phillips again.
I mean, I can see pressure to make decisions before the grades for the spring term are known for people graduating in the spring, but I don't see why there would be different numerical cutoff. That's not saying I'm in favor of allowing there to be different cutoff dates for spring. Just that I can see why that would be something that one might have done.
Okay. Well, we will provide information and have a more in-depth, informed decision. Senator Urbancic.
So my understanding is that the current cutoff is they're not GPA based, they are percentile based. And so that's going to be flexible term by term as whatever the GPAs of the students graduating that term happen to be, with the cutoffs, I believe, being 2%, 5%, and 10% for summa, magna, and cum laude. So having consistent thresholds instead would add less, it would reduce uncertainty for students and also for recommenders. There have been times when I've been asked by institutions, okay, well, you have this Latin honors, but like, what does that mean, in terms of GPA? Like, I have no idea what that is because we don't have it, and it's impossible to search for ex post. So that would be helpful for both students and faculty in different ways.
Right. Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, we will come back to this topic at a future meeting. We'll take this into account when we clean up the motion that will be presented. And we will turn to what I think is the last item on our agenda, which is a resolution brought to us by a group of faculty we heard from a month ago on the withdrawal of the North Campus conditional use permit. So Biddy Roy and Bart Johnson, if you could come forward.
So thank you very much. We talked with you not that long ago. Since that time, we've had a further meeting with representatives of UO administration and planning. We were invited to the Senate Exec Council and had a useful discussion there, both with members of this body as well as from the administration. And so I don't want to reiterate all the pieces we talked about last time, but I want to just sort of bring things up to present date on this and then quickly move into a point for discussion. We're going to have a quick report by me. We have our colleague Ed Whitelaw, Emeritus of Economy Department, and Maisie, I've forgotten your last name? Mailey, excuse me.
Oh, Maisie Bailey.
Maisie Bailey,
yeah.
The student's here to speak. So the short summary is that we believe that the university's conditional use permit While it presents a new level of commitment to ecological restoration and environmental education, it presents a fragmented vision that's going to enshrine in the UO's community's collective memory ball fields along the riverfront, new ball fields along the riverfront that may never be needed, instead of having us unite around some collective vision for really making use of this amazing place as a nationally renowned and locally celebrated resource for environmental education and in sustainability studies. You all know the riverfront. We've talked just a moment ago, there was a presentation earlier about whether their conditional use permit could be separated between the north and the south of tracks. We urge the university to pursue that. It would allow them to move forward on things south of the track, which are relatively urgent, while waiting on things north of the track that are not urgent decisions to make. The conditional use permit requests 30 years of approval for this plan. We don't think we need to put the ball fields in there now, and we don't need to, again, create a permission for 30 years into the future to have ball fields there. Could I have the next slide, please? It's an amazing resource. If you haven't been down there, we just have a few slides of some of the wildlife that are down there. I'm an ecologist as well as a landscape architect. There are areas along that riverfront that are unique. Some of the highest quality backwater slough that I'm aware of along this entire section of the river, and I've surveyed it under different contracts and consultations. Next slide, please. Again, some more qualities of the wildlife that's there. It's a degraded riverfront. We know that. All riverfronts in Oregon and most of the western United States are degraded, but it's a riverfront, and it has enormous ecological value. Next slide. That ecological value, then, is not just for some biodiversity point of view. It's an educational resource that's already being used. These are federally delineated wetlands that are down along there with vernal pools in them. Next slide, please. This is the plan we've discussed. Again, on the bottom slide just shows in that footprint in the middle right up there. This is number 5. That's the proposed footprint of the ball fields. You see there is a proposal along the river for restoration in the light green zone, and then an additional 100-foot for ecological restoration that came about through our negotiations to reduce the size of the ball fields, which were originally much larger. There were 5 of them, and they were bigger than that. Next slide. But before we go there, but the size of that area, although it may look like it fits big ball fields, ecologically is not that big. Next slide, please. This shows a slide that looks at the different widths of different ecological zones and the widths they require from sort of a minimum width out to maximum widths. And for it to really make use of this as an environmental education site, we need to be capturing some of those types of widths in that area for these ecological purposes as a foundation for environmental education out there. Next slide. These are some of the uses that are already occurring on there. All different kinds of classes around university. Next slide, please, unless you want to add something, Biddy. Biddy?
I would just say that there are a huge number of classes that use the riverfront. I was stunned. It's 10 different departments.
Next slide, please.
Next slide. For a total of at least 3,500 students potentially per year using the riverfront. So it runs everything from people who are using the upland area that the ball fields are slated for. And I will say that there's a really big difference between grass, which is currently there, and AstroTurf in terms of what students can do out there. There's a lot of classes that use the upland area for teaching surveying and sampling design, things like that. And there's a huge number of classes that only use the riverfront. There's both. There's a mixture of classes that use it.
So it's natural capital that we'd be wise to expand on as part of our environmental education, as part of the future of our mission at the university. Next slide, please. I want to move quickly through these as I can. And then these are just some visioning statements that some of my students have done over the years of thinking about how we could enhance this area for outdoor classrooms, for ecological studies. Next slide, please. And again, something that would be very different than a place that included half a footprint of ecological restoration and half a footprint of recreational ball fields that would likely be artificial turf fields, almost certainly have 24/7 light switches on them and large fences around them to keep the balls from going the wrong places. So we're urging the university to instead to really think for the long-term future of this site and its possibilities. I would just like to read at the last something that I think really encaptures our vision, and it's a statement from our president, Michael Schill, in winter of 2018, says, at the University of Oregon, we spend a tremendous amount of time thinking about impact. Whether we're exploring fresh approaches to help students succeed, investing in research that solves problems, launching initiatives to better understand our world, or advocate for more resources to support higher education, the goal is always to enable the people of the University of Oregon to make the world a better place. It takes great imagination, focus, and patience to create a significant impact. We must be willing to take risks, to experiment, and to challenge the status quo. We must sustain a culture that rewards creativity and encourages respectful discourse. We must open our minds to new perspectives and our hearts to new possibilities. We wholeheartedly agreed with the President. We'd like to see that take place down here on the riverfront. Ed?
Yes, so next, Ed will talk briefly about some of the economic cost-benefit analysis, and then Maisie.
Oops, how do I get this out? Ed.
I'm reading whereases. Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
You talk and we'll read the whereases.
Okay. This is just introduction. We can skip to the... Okay, so what I did was read the proposal with a lot of help from Samir Wakar, and I reduced it to this. And so through my eyes, the apparent, I emphasize apparent purpose of the proposal is to use the area between the tracks and into the river to help increase enrollment to 34,000. That area has three dynamic systems. The area contains an urban university economic system, a land, riparian, riverine ecological system, and, of course, climate change. In the proposal, the authors ignore cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis is the quintessential method for evaluating alternatives to an action A, action B, whatever. And it is especially applicable when natural capital has independent value and no substitutes. In the UO proposal, the authors assert the 34,000 goal, physical capital as buildings and AstroTurf soccer fields, no alternative sites, and the UO Eugene's public good is treated as one of the university's private goods. That's jargon, that's sort of terms of art in economics, and they are loaded with meaning. The U of O assumes that the soccer fields would yield greater competitive edge in the market for college students than would the land, riparian, riverine ecological system. And that's meant to be a self-contained observation.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maisie Bailey. I'm an undergraduate here at University of Oregon. My major is in biology, and I had the privilege of using the Riverfront for many classes last summer, such as insect biology and field botany, which consisted of what Biddy and Bart are talking about. We would go identify various flowers, plants, and bugs, because I was an insect biology as well. And it just completely solidified my love and want to be a biologist and ecologist. And before I was having issues like deciding do I want to do medicine? Do I want to do this? Classic stuff. So I just think this Riverfront is very, very valuable to students. And if I can get this much out of it from the state it's in now, I just think of what it could be if we were to improve it and make it for more education and sustainability and ecology and promote the love and want for this land for fellow students. And this isn't just scientist students, this is also art students who use that land for inspiration for their art as well. Just want to say, I've never seen a more beautiful change in seasons since I've taken those classes on the riverfront, having the knowledge of various, plants and species. So I just find extreme value in this riverfront. So.
And this is a graduate student, Matt Goslin, in the geography department.
Hi, I'm Matthew Goslin. I'm a PhD student in geography. I've had the opportunity to use the Riverfront area through multiple occasions. I first became acquainted with it in Biddy's botany field course, and she had assigned the graduate students to do our final plant collection in that area. And at first I remember feeling like, why does Biddy want to restrict us to doing our plant collection here? It looks like such an ordinary area. Why can't we do our plant collection in Mount Pisgah or Spencer Butte or somewhere? And once I got out there, I was really surprised by, the overwhelming diversity of plant species there. It was very easy to do the plant collection. And also by the interaction between both native and non-native plant species. It was very informative and instructive. I then also used the area as a lab instructor for Dan Gavin's biogeography course. And it's very rare to have places that are this close to the university that are natural systems that you can essentially walk to during a lab hour and complete your field work. And so it was a great opportunity for students to actually do field survey work, get that experience. And we were looking at the patterning of certain species, dispersal patterns. And it's the kind of thing that we really wouldn't be able to do anywhere else within walking distance of the university. And then finally, for me personally, my PhD dissertation is on a plant species that mostly grows out in Eastern Oregon. It's a river plant, and it actually grows. There's a few of them growing near the Otson Bridge right there. And so when I have had my parents visit me here or other friends from out of town, I always go out there so I can show them my plant species that I'm doing my research on. And then as part of that, I end up talking to them about the class that I took with Biddy, the class that I TA'd for Dan, and it becomes a great advertisement for the academic work that we do at U of O.
So we could go on, but we won't, because we want to have that time. We're happy to answer questions from you as part of the discussion. We were supposed to read the motion, given that it's 8 pages long and you have it in your hands. We've been given permission to just read the 4 be it resolved. So I'm going to skip over the 15 whereases with references, kind of like Alice's Restaurant and the pictures with the numbers and the arrows on the back. You can read it at your leisure. And instead go on to the 4 resolves of here. Be it resolved that the University Senate calls upon the UO administration to withdraw the riverfront property north of the tracks from consideration under the present North Campus CUP application in order to allow further deliberations among and between the Senate, the administration, and the university community regarding the best use of this property. And 2, be it further resolved that if the City of Eugene determines that the riverfront property portion cannot be withdrawn from consideration under the present North Campus CUP application, the Senate requests that the entire CUP application be withdrawn and the North Campus plan re-envisioned. And 3, be it further resolved that the University Senate requests that the University of Oregon administration identify areas away from the riverfront for future playing fields and study the potential for increased sharing of current athletic fields between the athletic program, PE, and rec and club sports. And finally, 4, be it further resolved that the University Senate moves that any future uses for the riverfront make use of the unique features of the Willamette River and associated habitats, and should emphasize ecological restoration, nature experience, and academics that are closely aligned with the university's mission of cultivating transformational leaders through experiential learning and public service and stewarding its natural resources. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for reading that. Is there a second to this motion? I think you're a sponsor, so Senator Carlton. Thank you. Discussion about the motion or questions for the nice people who brought it to us? Well, John Bonine, Law.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about law. The General Counsel suggests that the city ordinance may require a combination of both north and south of the track coverage in the CUP rather than 2 CUPs or a single CUP south of the tracks. But the specific provision that was referred to was never referred to. We don't know what part of the ordinance is even being mentioned. General Counsel suggested that the Land Use Board of Appeals may not be happy if the CUP only covers south of the tracks or if there's 2 CUPs. But again, no analysis of why the Land Use Board of Appeals might feel that way. there's been no reference in the discussion to any prior precedents decided by the Land Use Board of Appeals, which is what lawyers would normally look to find out what they might do. The General Counsel has said the legal question is up in the air. It's interesting, to me at least, that the supposed legal analysis is based simply upon conversations that have been had by various people with various city staff, and in one instance with a city attorney. The lack of any legal memorandum that might be reviewable by members of the Senate on these issues makes some of us, trained as lawyers, unwilling to buy arguments based upon conversations that some people have had with some other people. In my opinion, there's no reason for the Senate to do less than whatever it prefers to do so, simply because of vague legal statements. And keep in mind that even if city policies exist, policies can also be changed. So in my opinion, the Senate should simply express its opinion on the merits without consideration to the, I guess, warnings issued earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Boatney. Senator Urbancic.
To quote the Senate Vice President, I'm no lawyer, but the fact that it references the North Campus CUP suggests that a campus master plan has already undergone a subdivision of some sort. There's maybe other parts of campus plans that are part of a master plan under a different CUP. It seems that it may be consistent to further subdivide that. I presume that the North Campus CUP is not the only CUP we have.
Thank you. Additional, Senator Minson.
Yeah, so I don't even know where to begin with this conversation. And this simple fact that I really kind of thought I'd sit back and listen to what everyone else had to say, because I'm really conflicted on this one. I'm a raging environmentalist. I'm a member of Surfrider Foundation as well as Protect Our Winters, and I believe wholeheartedly in protecting our rivers and our waterways and everything else. By the same right, I'm also, and I support the sciences, being in the natural sciences as well, so I think having your support in the biology is great. On the same right, you know, there's a serious problem of getting people out exercising enough, and I think had some solutions maybe to having that. One of the challenges I have with this, I guess, is my own internal conflicts, I guess, on the two sides of it. It's not clear to me if part of the issue is the fact that it keeps being stated these are going to be turf fields as opposed to natural grass fields. I got the impression perhaps that there was some working with, I'm not sure it was the CUP or someone else, that pushed back the boundaries and increased the area around the rivers, and that there almost seemed like maybe everyone's finding a happy medium, and then now there's a change to that. I'm very happy to hear that, because I bike by that every single day to go to and from work, that it is in such good shape as it currently is, and that could be better. I do know also, of course, that north of the river, there's all the Alton Baker Park area, and that's all not developed. There's not game fields and other things. And so is there a way that you can find to have a happy medium that we can have some, not all or none decision, but something to say, okay, we can have ball fields, but they can't have lighting at certain times, and they can't have turf. They have to be natural grass field, but they have a certain setback, as you've kind of explained. Again, I'm asking this only because I really thought there'd be more debate on this. Maybe people already decided. I am not decided, probably less on this than I've ever done on anything because of my allegiances.
So all of us are actually really in favor of education, including working the body, because brains work better when the body's worked. The trick here is that playing fields don't really belong on the river, really of any sort, although I could probably go with the grass fields a little bit easier. We're trying to find some solutions that include, there's lots of different ideas. For example, playing fields could potentially be built in Glenwood, easily accessible by the MX. It could be possible to work with, say, South Eugene High School and actually set up a mentoring program in which club sports at the U of O was helping high school students. That would also be easily accessible from the U of O. Athletics has not played very nicely with club sports. We could encourage better cooperation and use of the fields that are already present. So I think there are a lot of good creative solutions that are possible, and that we can not do one or the other, but actually do both in a more sensible way. And I think that more time for planning and consideration is part of what we need. And that's really why I'd like to really advocate for splitting the CUP. And there have been variances granted in the past regarding CUPs. And so I certainly think that it's possible now. Did that answer at least somewhat your concerns?
Could I have one short one there? I think the other thing is the CUP is silent on whether those are grass or AstroTurf. In all the discussions we've had, though, with what the need from sports rec is, and we want to see them get their needs, it's for year-round playing fields, it's for surfaces that are more reliable than a grass field, and it's to have lighting out there. And the lighting is a particular concern to us because of the disruption that can create for habitat along the river. In Alton Baker Park, they do not have lights along there. The city doesn't allow them to have lights in that section, specifically because it disrupts wildlife, circadian rhythms, and things like that. Also understand they'd need to put up fences up there that, at least to my eye as a designer, would create a division between ball fields here, riparian here, and visitors kind of go through on a bike path or something pushed up right against it. So really feel like it bifurcates a very small space. But we're absolutely supportive of finding a solution as part of this for where the ball fields that are needed can be and to satisfy those needs for rec sports.
Thank you. Senator
And
Frazee.
Alton Baker Park, unfortunately, we cannot really we can take classes over there for look-see kinds of things, but we can't do sampling. It's not as safe of a place to send students for independent projects. Having something on campus is far better for that.
Senator Frazee.
First of all, I just want to thank the makers of the motion and the presenters. I think you presented quite a compelling case. Like Senator Minson, I think I too am conflicted, though, because what I have not yet heard is there does seem to be some misalignment between the assumptions of the motion and of the presentation and those we heard from Provost Bonivar at the start of this of the meeting, where he said, if I recall correctly, that the CUP was a proposal that we're talking about AstroTurf or grass, but the fact that fields are in the CUP is just an option. I think that's what I heard. If it's not part of a definite plan. Am I mistaken in that?
You are right, and you're also not right, because I'm on the campus planning committee, and so I've been in the same room with the people who are interested in these recreational fields, and they're very strongly advocating for these fields and for them to be artificial turf and lit.
So is there? I'm not quite clear on the campus planning process, so forgive my ignorance. But should we pass this motion today? The CUP application goes forward. Is there no further discussion about what will happen?
Yes, there is, and I think campus planning is real clear on this. Before an approval went in within the campus plan to actually put the ball fields in there, there would be further process, further engagement, further discussion on that. I've been here for 22 years. I appreciate our campus planning process in that way. I think a number of us felt dissatisfied with the way the process went forward to date, that there were a number of proposals for the conditional use permit that did not include ball fields that we participated in, that never showed up and went to campus planning commission or committee as alternatives. If you're doing pluralistic visioning, you should include a range of alternatives. Those alternatives were not there. Was told by someone on campus planning staff they were not there because the UO administration said, you will have ball fields in that proposal. So they were pulled off. That doesn't feel, that's not a good precursor to the idea of a full, open, participatory process to make the decision in the future. I think the other is, after 22 years here, is that I really meant what I said in the introduction. It may have been vague, but I believe that passing the CUP or enacting it will enshrine in our collective memory the idea that the ball fields are a done deal and are intended to be there, and has to be a fight against them in the future. That fight could happen next year. That discussion could be 5 years. It could be 10 years out. It could be 25 years out. And I think we know enough about now that we should unite around a vision of using that for environmental education and unite and build around that, rather than retaining this maybe yes, maybe no that is enshrined, I think, in the CUP. So.
Thank you.
Just one. I can't look at this proposal without screaming about the omission of alternatives. At the heart of all of this decision-making should be some comparison about what else we might do, which are questions of fact, the answer to which we haven't. These are questions of fact for which there are methods to answer, and we've done none of that yet, as near as I can tell. I regard most of this discussion here as idle, well-intended, but ignorant.
Additional comments. Senator Gary.
Thanks. Part of what I was going to say has already been discussed, but I want to add that I'm very much in favor of resolutions 3 and 4. I think this, I'm getting north and south mixed up, but the part with the ball fields needs further discussion. My understanding is that that would happen. It sounds like it hasn't gone well to date, but it would continue to happen. There hasn't been a decision about that part of the riverfront, and I think that will require a lot more input from all of us, and those of us who are concerned about protecting the environmental nature of that area can get more engaged at that point. I think the decision, though, right now is not about ball fields, because that's not being decided either by us or currently. It's about whether the university can build the parking garage, because that's the purpose of the current CUP. And if it's possible to divide the CUP, that would seem to be the best thing to do, but I'm afraid I can't vote in favor of this resolution if all 4 are put together, because number 2 says, well, just chuck out the whole thing if we can't separate. And what I heard General Counsel say was not just, well, maybe, maybe not, but the opinion of the city attorney is that it won't be possible to divide. Now, that's just an opinion of a lawyer. It's just a conversation. But it sounds like it's going to be unlikely to be successful.
Senator Bryant. We need a microphone.
Hello? Yes. So a couple of things. Just to broaden the context a little bit, we have, and I actually, assuming the best of intentions from all of our administrators, they're almost all new to the area, and they are almost all likely not to necessarily be here for very long. If you put into a CUP of this nature the option to do something that you think maybe shouldn't happen, then it is very possible not only, as Bart said, to enshrine a bad idea or enshrine a how should we say, not a properly deliberated idea, but you also make available the option to do this not deliberated thing to anybody who follows the current administrators and who changes the campus plan. The campus plan by the way, campus plans are finally approved or disapproved in the president's office and in Jamie Moffat's office as well. These are the decision makers who could easily change in 2 years' time and decide, we want to do this thing and we've got city permission. That means that there's no way for the community, and by that I mean the university community and the Eugene, the international community that might be interested in the ecological and environmental asset that we have available to us. None of those people can do anything then, because it will have been approved by planning, and short of stopping the bulldozers, there'll be nothing that they can do legally once the CUB has been approved if the next provost, the next president, the next facilities manager and campus planner decide to take advantage of something that we've allowed them to do. So this is the situation. This is something that is not just us that we're relying on our administrators. This may be a different set of administrators, and the community will be silenced if we don't ask them to remove those fields and buildings from north of the track. They can always submit other plans for when they actually do know what they want to do. I mean, that's just something they can do. So that's, and if they don't know what they want to do, why would you put in something that would basically prevent input from the community in a pluralistic universe that we're trying to achieve here? That's it.
Thank you. Senator Koopman. You're good. Senator Villegas.
Just to follow on that, it seems to me that playing fields are playing fields, and whether they be built or not, the fact is that once the land is handed over to do something with it, most likely will be playing fields with synthetic turf. Playing fields, parking lots. If we really need a parking lot, such parking lots in such a hurry, why doesn't the university go faster in terms of also trying to figure out what to do with other land, right? That riverfront, something that would be ecologically sound, and they would work with your proposals if they're in such a hurry. So I don't think it's a good idea to give up the riverfront in the name of the fact that we need to be the parking lots. If we need the parking lots, then we should think about the ecological responsibility for the other part too, and consider them one part and not two, where you eventually we're going to lose the other one. Finally, parking lots, playing fields. Once the riverfront is gone, it's gone. We can build parking lots and playing fields just about anywhere. The river gone is gone. Front is gone. It's gone.
Senator Frazee.
So I have a question that, quite frankly, may not be germane to the motion, so feel free to overrule me. But I want to bring up something that Senator Gary brought up about. I'm just curious, what is the impact to the development of the night campus should the CUP application not go through? Is there anybody that can answer that for us?
Is there anybody that can answer that? I mean, I think as far as I understand things, it's the parking garage. Oh, good, Mike Harwood. Yes, he will know. Vice President for Planning and Campus Planner.
Sorry, I was trying really hard to be inconspicuous. Sorry, the question was about.
If the CUP was pulled completely, what would be the impact of the night campus? Did I get that right?
The CUP, and again, the reason we're in this is a legacy of the city and the university deciding in 1988, when we did the Riverfront Research Park, that we were going to do this collective development. We're now living under something that's been codified into the city statute that requires a conditional use permit for that entire tract of land. So whether or not it can be subdivided or not is really a legal question. The city, I think, is discovering that they got ahead of themselves. They didn't do the right research to answer the question that was posed by some of the folks here in this room as to whether or not that could be split out. To the question about what is the impact to night campus, the impact to night campus is not on the building itself, but it is on the parking garage that supports that, which is south of the tracks. I think that the challenge that we have right here, I think, is that an unintended consequence of this withdrawal of the conditional use permit really, based on what we've been talking about here, really undermines the campus planning tradition that we have that goes back 40, 50 years at the campus. And I'm as passionate as our colleagues are about the environment, about doing something that we're all proud of at the end of the day. But I really believe that the city isn't the one that should be dictating to us as a collective body whether we should or shouldn't do something. I think that's what our campus plan process and our internal campus processes are about. But being one of those new ignorant administrators that's not long for this campus, I understand I may not be qualified to speak to that particular aspect.
Thank you. Senator Otis. We'll get you a microphone. It'll come.
Hi. Thank you all. Thank you for your presentations. I support this resolution. I'm a sponsor on it. And just a few words. I just think that it's consistent with the educational mission of our university, not only because it provides a precious resource for, as folks have spoken to, for our students to learn about a particular ecosystem, a very specific ecosystem. But also, I think that we are teaching students through the way we use our land, not just through inviting them to participate in studying it and being in it and learning from it, but in showing them how to properly use it. And the proper use, I would say, is not ball fields, which can, it seems to me, be placed in a number of areas, and people will still have a quality experience playing sports. I'm a fan of sports. I do them. I think exercise is important, but it's not our first mission at this university. So it seems to me that ball fields can go elsewhere. It also seems to me that the noise generated by ball fields could interrupt the educational mission of the space, given that the noise would generate, would disturb the natural habitat and make it difficult for students to actually observe animal behavior and various, insect behavior, et cetera.
Thank you. Any additional comments or discussion? Senator Davis.
Thanks. So I'm here representing other academic units, and the museum does take a lot of kids out there to collect fossils from the area called Fossil Beach right by the footbridge. Also, in my role in Earth Sciences, I take 400 students out there, not all at once, though. Groups of more like 25 at a time. But I guess my question here isn't about whether or not we should be resolving to protect this ecosystem. My question is, what happens if we vote to approve this as the Senate and the administration chooses not to do what we ask? What happens at that point? Because we're calling upon the administration to withdraw, but I don't think we can actually enforce it. So I'm curious what the downstream effects might be. Thank you.
I mean, if the administration decides not to follow our recommendations, they will write us a nice letter explaining why they decided not to follow our recommendations. And unless we do something further, another resolution, another motion, something, that will be the end of it. Right? So I think, as far as I understand things, the CUP has already been submitted to the city, assuming this gets rejected. So assuming we pass this and then it's rejected by the administration, I think the CUP would still just stay in the hands of the city as it stands. That's an educated guess. But the administration could do anything they wanted with the resolution as long as they explain to us what they're going to be doing. Senator Bryant.
But it wouldn't end there. The fact is the CUP will then be in the public's hands, and there are a lot of people in Eugene that support the riverfront as is, and that includes people at the university, and they will all be able to basically make as much noise and as much political and exercise their political franchise as much as they need to in an election year, by the way, which is where a number of city councilors are up. And very likely be able to, if not cancel the CUP, because they'll lengthen the process significantly. So rather than basically the removal of this part that we find controversial and undeliberate in the plan, and allow the rest of the plan to move forward, what the university has done is they've put into the public's hands something that they don't want, justifying it to build a parking structure, which is not that attractive to begin with. And more than likely, the fact that the delaying will take place if there's a tremendous amount of public interest will be exactly what the public will want. They'll want to see it delayed as much as possible to make it difficult for the university to continue the CUP as submitted. And that's the most likely outcome if the university doesn't do their best to actually remove that part of those buildings and those fields from the CUP, so that they can do something better later. And that's, so more than likely what they have done is they've lengthened the process for themselves.
Thank you for that explanation. Further commentary. We have visitor in the back, I believe.
Hi, it's George Evans, Economics. So I wanted to make sure the senators had plenty of time to discuss this, but I would like to make some comments. These will be along the lines of Bart, Biddy, and Ed. I'll kind of frame it in terms of Ed's points. The first point I'd like to make is that I'm really upset about the process that was followed that brought us to the CUP. The first time I heard about this plan was in November when I saw a sign that indicated that there was to be an open house about a plan that was entering its final stages. And there was one sign on the Ruth Bascom Riverfront path. I walked around the whole thing. There was just one sign, and it was for a week later, and a week after that open house, it was gone. So this has to do with whether you're trying to take into account the amenity values of people who use that area. And huge numbers of people already use that area, and more people will be using that area. And I'm talking about students, I'm talking about faculty, and I'm talking about members of the Eugene public and visitors. So more of those people are going to be using that if, for example, the area near eWeb is developed as is likely. A second aspect of the planning process that has really bothered me is that it has become clear that no alternative to artificial turf floodlit fields was considered for that area. Clearly you can locate those in other areas. At an early stage, it gradually emerged that these were simply not going to be part of the planning process. And I did go to the open house because I saw that sign, luckily, and I went to a second open house. At both of those open houses, there was no discussion of those fields other than as artificial turf fields with floodlights and fences. That was the only possibility considered. We were told at length why grass wouldn't do. Okay, so that's one issue. The other issue, again, connects with Ed's last point, was about competitive edge. When I have seminar visitors to the economics department, if I can manage it, I take them to the river. They're always stunned. We have a huge competitive advantage if we develop this according to the vision that Bart and Biddy outlined. A huge competitive advantage. Not much competitive advantage from having playing fields right on the river. People will be appalled if they have been here in the past and come again and see that. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, really, we can think of this in terms of cost-benefit analysis. I do as an economist, and the plan just failed miserably in that respect. And really, we've got to somehow roll back this part of the conditional use permit for north of the river. It's just ridiculous.
Thank you. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. I think that we've had Senator Bryant. Oh, all right, that was what I was going to suggest as well. We have a second to that. Is calling the question, is that debatable?
Moving the question to take a vote to close debate.
That's right, so basically I have to take...
To close debate.
Okay, so all in favor of closing debate? This would be for calling the question. All right, all opposed? Looks unanimous. Now this is the question itself. So voting yes here will be for the resolution. Voting no would be against it. All those in favor of the resolution, please raise your placard. We will do a count. All those opposed? So what was the vote? Can you 29 to 5. Thank you very much. The resolution passes. All right, in the last few minutes, are there any notices of motion to be given? I'm seeing none. Senator Vice President Harbaugh.
I'd just like to point out that we have I'd just like to point out that we have an opening at the moment for a senator to sit as the Senate representative on the Campus Planning Committee. And I think we also have a few open slots, but we will fill those during the regular appointment process. If you're interested in being the Senate member of the Campus Planning Committee, please give me and Chris an email by tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you. That was not a notice. What's that?
I believe every 2 weeks.
You can certainly find that information on the Senate webpage if you look under committees A to Z. It should tell you the frequency of meetings, at least as is recorded. All right, any open discussion before we leave? I do want to make one announcement. We will have 2 deans tonight at the faculty club. So Dean Lindner of COD will be there, and Dean Moyea, thank you, from SOJC will be there as well. So that's in 5 minutes. Please meet us at the faculty club if you want to hang out with your dean. Senator Phillips, it is still open. Move to adjourn. The meeting is now adjourned.